Okay, for Unit 2, Human Development, we have three more sections to go over. First one is sections 3 and 4 in Chapter 11, which it looks at adolescence. And then we will do one section in Chapter 12, which is on death and dying. So as for adolescence, let's do this one. We're going to take a look at section 3, which is on identity formation. Your main idea, one of the main tasks of adolescence is the search for identity. Psychologist Erik Erikson maintained that the main task of the adolescent stage is the search for identity. Erikson believed the task is accomplished by choosing and developing a commitment to a particular role or occupation in life. Adolescents may experiment with different values, beliefs, roles, and relationships. Adolescent identity is achieved when different selves are brought together into a unified sense of self. An identity crisis is a key aspect of adolescent identity development. An identity crisis is a turning point in a person's development when the person examines his or her values and makes or changes decisions about life roles. According to psychologist James Marcia, the adolescent identity crisis comes as teenagers face decisions about their future work, moral standards, religious commitment, political orientation, or sexual orientation. He concluded there are 4 categories of adolescents' identity status. Adolescents do not remain in a single one of these categories throughout their entire adolescence, nor do they proceed through them in any particular order. Rather, they move in and out of the various categories from one to another. The 4 categories are identity moratorium, identity foreclosure, identity diffusion, and identity achievement. A moratorium is a timeout period. Teens experiencing what Marcia termed identity moratorium delay making commitments about important questions. They are actively exploring various alternatives in an attempt to forge their identity. They may even experiment with different behaviors and personalities. Adolescents experimenting with different ways of life in their search for an identity may adopt distinctive ways of dressing or behaving. To avoid an identity crisis, adolescents in the identity foreclosure category make a commitment that forecloses or shuts out other possibilities. These adolescents make a definite commitment, but the commitment is based on the suggestions of others rather than on their own choices. They adopt a belief system or a plan of action without closely examining whether it's right for them. They may simply follow the model set by their parents, peers, teachers, or other authority figures in order to avoid uncertainty. Adolescents in the category of identity diffusion seem to be constantly searching for meaning in life and for identity because they have not committed themselves to a set of personal beliefs or an occupational path. They lack goals or interests and seem to live from crisis to crisis. Identity diffusion typically occurs in middle school and early high school. Adolescents in the identity achievement category have coped with crises and have explored options. They have then committed themselves to occupational directions and have made decisions about important life questions. Although they have experienced an identity crisis, they have emerged from it with solid beliefs or with a plan. For example, to pursue a course of study that leads to a particular career. Identity achieved teens have feelings of well-being, self-esteem, and acceptance, and they're capable of setting goals and working towards attaining their goals. Gender and identity formation. Research shows that female adolescents are now more apt to approach identity formation like male adolescents. Female adolescents do, however, express more concern about the challenge of balancing work life and family life. Identity formation is often more complicated for adolescents from ethnic minority groups. Prejudice and discrimination can be contributing factors. And rites of passage. A rite of passage marks a person's entrance into a new stage of life. These ceremonies include baptisms, graduations, and marriages. For many people around the world, various rites, such as a school graduation and wedding, signify the end of one period of life and the beginnings of another. And again, graduation ceremonies are an example of a rite of passage that you will take part in at the end of the year. Section 4 looks at the challenges of adolescence. Your main idea: adolescence is a difficult time for most teenagers, with concerns about friendships, jobs, future careers, and body image among your many challenges. Adolescence can be a difficult time for some teens. Challenges of adolescence can include school problems, family problems, loneliness, feelings of low self-esteem, concerns about the future, eating disorders, alcohol abuse, and drug abuse. Eating disorders. Two of the most well-known eating disorders that typically affect teenagers are anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by self-starvation and a distorted body image. In the United States, it typically affects young white women of higher socioeconomic status. Bulimia nervosa is the recurrent cycles of binge eating followed by dramatic measures to eliminate food, and the great majority of sufferers are female. The origins of anorexia and bulimia are believed to be influenced by cultural and social aspects, such as the need to conform to a feminine ideal and a family history of eating disorders. Treatment can include counseling, treatment programs, and monitoring. It's very important to know, though, that while it typically does affect young white women of higher socioeconomic status, that it is not just something that young white women experience. Eating disorders can affect all genders, all age ranges. Substance abuse. The prevalence of substance abuse, use of drugs and cigarettes among teenagers increased during the 90s. The use of cigarettes and marijuana actually declined from 2001 to 2007. Peer recommendation, parental use, and stress are among the reasons adolescents try alcohol and other substances. And treatment can include detoxification and counseling therapy. Most schools' drug prevention programs are aimed at stopping the use of alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana. Research on the effectiveness of prevention programs shows mixed results. Many adolescents struggle with issues of how and when to express their sexual feelings, but they receive mixed messages from their bodies to go ahead, and at the same time, advice from parents and other adults advising against early sexual relationships. The media is also a source of messages about sexual issues. About 7.2% of American girls between the ages of 15 and 17 become pregnant each year. Teenage pregnancies can be difficult for adolescent mothers. Half of all adolescent mothers quit school and go on welfare. Teen mothers are more likely to give birth to premature babies and babies who are below average in weight. The term juvenile delinquency refers to many illegal activities committed by children or adolescents. The most extreme acts include robbery, rape, and homicide. Less serious offenses are known as status offenses, which are illegal only when committed by minors. Research shows that low income and mothers working outside the home are not factors that contribute to juvenile delinquency. Facts that contribute include low self-esteem, feelings of alienation and estrangement, behavior problems that began early, lack of affection, lax discipline, use of severe physical punishment in the home, and academic issues, peer pressure, or a family history of criminal behavior. And that is it for adolescence. We're going to jump right into the last section of adulthood, which sadly is death and dying. The main idea: people deserve to die with dignity and the support of those who love them. After someone dies, the living often depend on religious beliefs and traditional customs to cope with their sadness. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross theorized there are 5 stages through which many dying people pass. The stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Kubler-Ross's theory has met with considerable criticism. Psychologist Edwin Schneidman has not found that feelings about dying follow any particular sequence. Another problem is that the theory may tempt people to ignore the uniqueness of each individual's experiences at the end of life. Dying with dignity. Dying people need to feel cared for and supported. They may also need relief from pain. Dying people need security, self-confidence, and dignity. So we'll look at 3 things in this area: euthanasia, the hospice alternative, and a living will. Euthanasia, commonly called the right to die, is illegal in most states. Right now, 5 states, Montana, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington, have right to die laws, which give terminally ill people the right to end their lives with a legally prescribed medication. It's probably more in the news recently because last year a 29-year-old California woman, Brittany Maynard, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and given less than 6 months to live. With her husband, she chose to move to Oregon so that when the time came, she could choose to die peacefully at home rather than let the cancer painfully end her life. More recently, on Friday, September 11th, California lawmakers passed legislation that would make California the sixth state to allow terminally ill people the right to die. And this law will go into effect in January unless it is vetoed within 12 days by the governor. Many people support making it legal with clear restrictions. Others argue that no one has the right to take a life, even one's own. There is the hospice alternative. Some dying people enter a hospice, a home-like place where dying people and their families receive physical and emotional support to help them cope with terminal illness. And many people write living wills, which are legal documents in which a person requests to be allowed to die rather than be kept alive by artificial means if disabled beyond a reasonable expectation of recovery. How do we deal with death? First, we have funeral. It's the traditional way to acknowledge that a member of the community has died. It reflects religious beliefs and cultural practices. Funerals are a way of saying goodbye to the deceased, and they provide a way to remember and celebrate the life of the deceased. People who are bereaved are mourning over the person they have lost. Bereaved people may feel sadness, loneliness, anger, numbness, and even relief. Most bereaved people eventually recover from their loss. People everywhere grieve when a loved one dies. However, the form that their grief takes and the rituals people observe in the face of death vary from culture to culture. To a great extent, our culture shapes us in the way we look at the world. The way we express grief and respond to death is no less a product of culture. Mexicans celebrate the Day of the Dead every November. According to some traditional African religions, the dead are believed to continue their existence in a spirit world where they have the power to help or harm the living. Chinese funeral customs involve lengthy services that can last up to 49 days. And traditional Jewish funerals include a simple burial ceremony followed by a 7-day period of mourning called Shiva. And that is it for our second unit on development.